thanks everybody for being here. Uh, Timmy and Nisi asked me to do a kind of a light moderation on the conversation here, which we'll be doing, but we're going to start with two treats in a row. And the first is Nisi singing, and the second is Nisi reading from The Curve of the World. So, Nisi, it's all yours.
Okay, all right. And yay, I'm not even muted. Well, I have formed the habit of singing whatever I do or reading, trying to find the appropriate piece. I asked Timmy what I should read. She said, what I should sing. She said Joni Mitchell. So I'm going to sing a verse and a chorus from Joni's first album, Song to a Seagull. And it's the title song. Fly, silly seabird, no dream can possess you. No voice has the power to bind up your wings. My gentle relations have names they must call me for loving the freedom of all flying things. My dreams with the seagulls cry, out of reach, out of cry. So one of the things we're going to talk about today, I hope, is how to say names that you've never heard before. And I'm going to tell you the names of four people in this passage that I'm reading from near the end of the book. Iakinthu is the captain of the Flying Fish and a diplomat. And as this passage opens, is currently suffering from malaria. Aranthal is her navigator and lover. Paisu, we could just think of as an exchange student, and Bedard as a fledgling patriarchalist. Chapter 24. Iakinthu wondered where she was, what she was doing. Chills, then fever racked her aching body. Sweat soaked her, and the sweat chilled her more deeply. A cool cloth stroked her forehead. The scent of lavender coiled through the smell of sickness. Flying fish sailed on, surrounding Iakinthu with the shush of the sea, the creak of timber and line. A breeze of cool salt air touched her skin, sending her abruptly into another fit of shivering. She knew Aranthal's touch from long, dear familiarity and the warmth of his body beside her. He held her. He bent over her and kissed her and blew poppy smoke into her mouth. She breathed it gratefully. The aching eased. She dreamed. A great scrape of sand on wood sent her rushing in her dream to the deck, afraid flying fish had run aground. Rest, sleep, Paisu whispered, holding her hand, preventing her from rising. It's all right. Everything is all right. Flying fish left Lady Jaguar far behind. Iakinthu slept again. She woke again, shivering again. Flying fish swayed in a motion strange to her. Where are we, she wondered. Are we adrift in a windless sea? When has Aranthal ever allowed flying fish to drift becalmed? As if she had called him, Aranthal supported her head with his strong, rough hand. Drink, he said. Iakinthu opened her eyes. Aranthal held a cup of regional design, its figures dancing elegantly across the surface. She saw them through a haze of poppy smoke. Poppy is better than Belithi, Iakinthu thought. The drawings stay on the cup instead of dancing away. They would dance on my nose and on my forehead if the cup held Belithi. Drink, Aranthal said again. It's a remedy for shivering. She sipped, nearly spat it out, swallowed hard. She trusted Aranthal, but the drink tasted worse than Belithi, with a bitterness that she tasted all the way down, a bitterness that broke through the heavy overlying sweetness. "What is it?" she whispered. Her lips were dry and cracked beneath the lavender and beeswax salve. "Well, where did it come from?" "It's cinchona," he said. "The guides helping flying fish to the untamable ocean traded for it." "Did her?" "Yes." She squeezed his hand, grateful to him for tasting it before he would ever ask her to drink it, grateful that he could drink it and avoid ill effects. "Sleep now," he said. The next time she woke, she felt much better. The racking ache had dissipated. Both chill and fever had vanished. She was hungry and thirsty. She tried to rise and failed, then peered around the cabin. "Iakinthu!" Paisu exclaimed, her voice soft. "I'm here," Iakinthu said. "May I have a cup of wine?" Paisu grinned and leapt up and unstoppered the wide-bottomed wine flask. She poured out the wine, mixed it with a little water, brought it to Iakinthu, and held it to her lips. Iakinthu savored the wine's cool purple taste. She touched the cup, but her hands shook. "Oh, I hate this weakness," she said. "I'll help you," Paisu replied. She gave Iakinthu another sip of wine and put her arm around her shoulders. Iakinthu put her hand on Paisu's. "What's the matter, dear Paisu?" Paisu hesitated. "Your hand trembles," Iakinthu said. Paisu gazed in Iakinthu's eyes. "Do Idaeans sacrifice children?" Instead of denying it, instead of asking her where she'd gotten such an idea, where else but from Bedard, Iakinthu took a deep breath. "1,000 years ago, in times of terrible danger, that happened. Sometimes when Mother Moon and her companion have terrible quarrels. The people sometimes quarrel, but do we sacrifice each other? Do we sacrifice given children?" "Oh, my dear." Iakinthu hugged Paisu and was glad to feel her stop shaking and relax in Iakinthu's arms. If a child were ever sacrificed again, they would be Idaean, and they would choose, they would consent. Paisu brought Iakinthu's hands to her lips and kissed them. "May Mother Moon and her companion stop quarreling," Paisu said. A sacrifice, Iakinthu thought, makes them quarrel more. They create chaos and destruction. Does Paisu want to know this? Paisu sat up straight, her composure recovered, her worries erased, and grinned. "Take another sip of cinchona," she said, "and then I'll go tell Aranthal you're awake." "Where are we?" Iakinthu asked. "The sea is so quiet. Can we be becalmed?" "You'll be so surprised when you see where we are," Paisu said. She helped Iakinthu sit up straighter and put another pillow behind her. "Are you too warm? Are you chilled?" "I'm just right," Iakinthu said, smiling. "Thank you, dear." Paisu ran out of the cabin, her footsteps pattering on the deck. Iakinthu lay back on the pillows, already exhausted, determined to stay awake. When she opened her eyes again, Aranthal sat nearby, suddenly with her. "Did I see you come in?" she asked. "I let you sleep," he said. He had tended her through the cold fever several times over the years. He put his hand to her forehead. "You'll be better soon." "Paisu promised me a surprise," Iakinthu said. "Yes," he said. "Are you strong enough to go on deck?" "With your help, I might be." He helped her sit on the edge of the bed. He brought a clean kilt and jacket and helped her dress. Iakinthu rose, shaky, determined, tottering. "Am I an old woman now?" she wondered. To the ladder, and dragged herself upward. Aranthal climbed close behind her, steadying her against the slow, strange sway of flying fish. Bright sunlight spilled through the hatchway. Iakinthu blinked against the light. "I should have worn my coal," she thought. Paisu and Renthazu helped her out onto the deck. A breeze touched her, hot and damp. Flying fish moved, but its sails were tightly furled. Lines reached up all around the gunwales like a rope fence. So many lines she found it hard to see through and pass them. but the sails sheets lay coiled and wrapped. Iakinthu's sight accustomed itself to the bright sunlight that seared in past the fence of rope. She gasped. Flying fish was flying. Stop there.
Wow. Well, flying fish was flying. It's just like such a great place to stop. Um, we're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about pronunciation. We're going to talk about what it takes to make a book out of this kind of a situation with a deceased author. But I'm going to exercise moderator's privilege and start by just talking a little bit about Vonda the person, because I can't separate Vonda the person from Vonda the books, and I don't think I'm the only person for whom that's true. And I thought I would start by telling two very quick stories and give Nisi and Timmi a chance to see if they have them. And Marnie, if you want to come back in and tell a Vonda story from a different perspective, we'd love that too. But my two are this. One is I was a guest in Vonda's home several times, and she always told me the same thing, which was that her goal was to have the best guest room in the city of Seattle. And she would always say, tell me anything that could have been in that guest room that you wished you would have had that you didn't have, so I can put it in there for next time. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing. And every time I get ready for guests, I don't have remotely the best guest room in the city of Oakland, but I always wish I did. And I always think of Vonda. And the other story, which just came to me this morning, is really very similar. The last time that I know of that Vonda bought a new car, probably sometime in the aughts, the salesman offered her a car with a driver's side airbag only, and she was genuinely horrified. And she said, can you think of anything worse than walking away from an accident in which your passenger was killed? It was just, to her, it was just the most disgusting thing that anybody had ever offered her. And I feel like those two little stories are a piece of who Vonda was. And it's in the books, it's in the short stories, but it's also in our memories. Timmi, Nisi, one of you?
I shared one story, the story of how I met Vonda in the podcast that came out yesterday in honor of the book's launch. The only other thing I will say is that at one point I broke my arm. And so I was dependent on friends for many things, like Amy Thompson combed my hair. Vonda cut my toenails. And I'm standing there thinking, I am having my toenails cut by a Nebula and Hugo Award winner. But I think it underlines just how community minded, but also practical she was. She, was like, she knew I couldn't cut my toenails with one hand, my left hand. So she was there for me.
Yeah. Timmi, do you have something to add?
No particular, no particular anecdote or recollection, except that the author became the person when I met her, or they combined the way these things do. And then I knew her in varying roles from then on. I mean, in not roles exactly, but in varying social and professional situations. But my last memories of her are occasions in which we were sharing a meal with Ursula, and one time was a lunch at her house which was wine-soaked and full of extravagant food for lunch. And and in those instances, her wryness and sense of humor predominated, and it was really delightful because she and Ursula were had a whole playful repartee going all the time. And that is really what has stuck with me.
If people on the in the Zoom don't know, Vonda and Ursula were the best of friends, and they published some chapbooks together. And they published them under the publisher's name Igor and Buntho Make Books, which will give you just a little flavor of the playfulness that Timmi is talking about. But let's move on to the book, and I kind of feel like we want to start with the pronunciations. Somebody put a story in the chat. Um, she was welcoming with the students, and she interacted. Give everyone a handmade sea creature. I meant to have my sea creature next to me
Oh,
at
yes.
this Zoom, and I forgot. So at some point, I might get up and get it. We'll see. But yes, I met
Yes,
Vonda and
I
her
have
sea
one
creature.
of them.
Ah, Nisi has one handy. Excellent. There were hundreds of them. They were in the Smithsonian and in the Smithsonian at one time. But I think it might be kind of interesting to start with this whole conversation we've been having about pronunciations. Um, a bunch of us, I think everybody who is going to be part of the WisCon reading is present on this Zoom. And we're going to be doing a reading from Curve of the World at the virtual WisCon this coming Friday. And we got to talking about how we were going to pronounce names, and we got in touch with Timmi and Nisi. We established that nobody knows. Vonda left no notes that anybody is aware of, and the cultures are hard to pin down in terms of how they pronounce things. So we are all flying by the seat of our pants, and Nisi just already caused me to revise one that I'll be reading later.
May
Timmi.
I also note that Vonda made a point of having Iakintu, the main character, um, mispronouncing people's names,
Yes.
names
Yes.
of other cultures. She just couldn't do it. So, in a way, that's a little lesson for us.
It's a little gift from Vonda for people. Vonda wrote the when Vonda wrote the last draft of this book, she knew she was dying. And so I almost feel like that's a little gift. Like you're gonna mess it up and don't worry about it because you did too.
I mean, it would be nice to have like if you're going to have a group reading to have everybody say Iakintu or Iakinthu or
Yeah, I think we will. I think we'll coordinate it in a
yeah.
group reading, and I'm going to coordinate some to you, Nising, when I read at the end. But it's just it's just kind of a fun thing, an interesting thing, that when you read the book, you will come up with your own pronunciations, the ones in your head, and that will be fine.
Because that's how we are when we're readers, right? We're just reading it to ourselves. And then we come to share it, and that's when we want to like coordinate. Yeah.
Yes, music that we play, Andrea said. Um, Kate says Vonda wasn't sure how the name should be pronounced either. It is oddly comforting.
But I mean, there are words like Balithi. What is
Right,
Cinchona is quinine, I'm sure.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But is it maybe it's Cinchona. I don't Cinconia. Ah,
So who wants to say something about the history of this book from Vonda left Clarion West as her literary executors. So they were responsible for the book. That was 2017. It's almost 10 years. Let's talk a little bit about what happened to the book in between. Maybe Nisi, as a Clarion West board member, maybe you can start us out here.
yeah, I was board member, and I was also on the committee formed from board members that was looking at how to bring this lovely treasure to the world. I was pretty involved, but the process was basically, are we shopping it around? So we tried that for a while. Are we shopping for an agent? This agent is not responding. This agent over here is not interested. It took months, years to check out various places. And some had conditions, and some, I guess they thought that there was no future in this weird look at the past. I'm not sure. Maybe they were like, ah, yeah, feminist science fiction, we've done that. Let's move on. I'm not sure why, but there was a bunch of back and forth with other agents besides Jenny, other publishers besides Aqueduct, until the picture finally came together years and years later. And a lot of us were chafing at the bit. We were like, come on, this needs to be out here. This is a beautiful work that changes how people look at things. So
Timmy, what happened when the book came to Aqueduct?
Well, Kath looked at it first and corrected obvious typos. She sometimes does this for me, or points out little inconsistencies in the margins, right? And then I read it. And so, I mean, I started out wondering why it had come to us. You know, because Vonda was a star. Anyway, so I read it, and I soon realized that I needed to, well, as is often the case with the stuff we publish, that it had to be read on its own terms, that I had to learn how to read it from the book itself, not from the conventional way of reading. I mean, that's one thing about this book. It's different. It's not the same old, same old. And then as I read it, I was just charmed and swept away by the language. I mean, it's really beautiful, luminous language. It's lyrical. Plus, there are all of these there were all of these differences among the characters that were represented on the page and were important and mattered, and yet the characters were able to negotiate among themselves, and we don't see that in our world anymore. Pretty much. I mean, it's sort of an all or nothing attitude that we have all over the world now. So anyway, I thought, okay, this is pretty long, but it's beautiful and we'll take it. And I thought it would be kind of expensive because long books are expensive to publish. So once I accepted it, I asked Marnie, well, and we signed the contract. I asked Marnie to appoint somebody who could stand in Vonda's place. Because when a book is edited, there has to be a dialogue between the author and the editor. One of the drawbacks for me, and I imagine for other publishers, is that that dialogue was not going to include developmental editing, which virtually every book has to some extent. So I was cognizant of that. That might also have something to do with its other publishers not taking it, you know.
I am not sure they even read it, honestly, Timmi.
Oh, that could be, or they read the first 50 pages.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, the other thing I should, well, no, I'll wait until we're talking about the book proper to say it's something that really strikes me about this book. Anyway, so Nisi agreed to take that role on. And from then on, it became a very labored, careful process. I mean, we sweated every sentence. And for me, one of the major problems was deciding what was what the style of the book demanded and what was incidental and the sort of scaffolding that the editor routinely takes out. You see, usually when books are turned in, there's a lot of scaffolding that the author has used when writing the novel, and then all that stuff has to be taken out, and the author often can't see it because they're used to it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, once I edited the text, I turned it over to Nisi, and Nisi went sweated every sentence too. I mean, every sentence and capitalizations, and as in the first sentence of the book, even. And we had many discussions, both in Zoom and in the margins of a manuscript as we passed it back and forth, and emails. So this, I don't even know how long that took, a couple of months maybe. Then we passed it to Debbie, and Debbie copy edited it.
So shall I come in here, Timmi, or?
Sure. I just wanted to say one more thing is that Nisi felt their role was to preserve Vonda's voice. So they fought for a lot of things that I would have changed. And that I feel sure that if I had been working with Vonda alive, you know, it would have been the usual sort of editorial conversation, not that her words were cast in stone, but because Vonda wasn't there, I needed to defer to Nisi. Or if I couldn't convince her, of course. Yeah, convince them first, right? Okay, Debbie, take it away.
Well, I just want to say that the idea of the two of you who are both such pristine and precise readers and writers going over every sentence of somebody else's book is, I mean, I got to be a fly on the wall for a tiny little bit of it, but I would have loved to have seen the entire process. And I totally get the preserving Vonda's voice versus editorial decision making. It all makes sense to me. From my perspective, Vonda, before she died, asked me to copy edit the book. And she, at that point, her agent was a woman named Fran Collin, who was getting pretty old. And I have an email from Vonda with a copy of the book, and it says, I've told Fran that you have to copy edit it. So that will happen. And then I sat on that book for 8 years because I believe that a copy editor should read fresh. And I never ever read, and it drove me crazy. I mean, every once in a while, I would be like, there's a Vonda book on my computer that I have not read, and what kind of crazy world is this? Um, but finally, it took Aqueduct some thinking about how to bring me in. And when I came in, first of all, there was this extremely clean, swept in all the corners by two fine housekeepers manuscript. And I was so uh, mesmerized by the places where I could see their bits of their conversations still in the margin. And also, and I think this will segue us into the book. It is, as Timmy said, it's a very different kind of book. You have to read it on its own terms. And it's Vonda being Vonda, Nisi being Nisi. Its terms are explained pretty early and pretty clearly. It's a book that teaches you how to read it. And I really had to go through it twice just to get over the sense of it before I got into the nitty gritty of copy editing, which is capitalization, and are these characters' names and these cultures' names always spelled the same way? And was somebody wearing silver bangles in chapter 2 and gold bangles in chapter 3 without having changed their jewelry? That's copy editing, and I love it. Um, but it was just such a treat. And I think when we talk about Nisi and Timmy and how hard they work, we also have to talk about Kath, who's
Yeah.
Timmy's number 2 at Aqueduct, and who is also super meticulous and careful and respectful, and also had a hand in this all the way through. And so then I think I'm going to go to Timmy, talk about why this is a different kind of book and whatever it is that you put off saying a minute ago.
Okay, I should, since there are so many writers in this audience, I think I can speak to my fascination with it in formal structural terms. Most people think of premises of books as being purely the conceptual content. In this case, Vonda changed the premises of the, the structure of the book and the small structures as well as the large ones.
Mm-hmm.
This book was not, I know that people would say, yes, it's character driven, but this book goes a step farther than that. Drama is in the background. Drama is the background for the characters' interactions and lives and thoughts and feelings. And this is not what we usually see in spec fic. So that affects the pacing, it affects the style, it affects everything about the book. Secondly, although we talk about the main character, Iakinthu, in fact, this is really an ensemble book. The main character is the ensemble of characters and on their voyage. And in fact, a lot of time is given to the minor characters. They have POV sections like Paisu. That's how I say it. Rather than Paisu, I say Paisu. I mean, she's really minor, but she comes in for a good share of the POV. And so and the other thing is texture. Texture is extremely important in this book. So I guess what I'm saying, although there is a narrative arc, it's just the shape in which the whole story unfolds. And it's a story of what is happening to this ensemble of characters. And for me, what was really fascinating was that the main arc is about this Iakinthu returning her foster child to his people and giving him the chance to decide whether he will go back to them or stay with the people who raised him. He was a slave, I think, when he came to Iakinthu. So that's and that's the driver of the narrative, and that's a very unusual sort of plot line for spec fic. It's about these relationships. Anyway, that's for me what is at the heart of this book. And the other thing is of how conflict is negotiated.
For me, yeah, that's the big thing.
And
Yeah.
for me, especially at this time, it it just cried out to me. I love that that we have these different cultures negotiating and saying this can be done.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say that I had not thought about the main protagonist being an ensemble, but that's very true. It's also very much what I was trying to do with Everfair,
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
country itself is a character, not just,
right, right. I
you
got
know,
that.
yeah, yeah. But so I guess I didn't think of that myself. But the negotiations were key. It was evident in the very first scene that this was not like, a sort of my way or the highway kind of culture. It's like, well, this is what you want and this is what I want, and how can we both get what we want? So it wasn't just like that sort of um, art of the deal thing where there's a pie and I get like, three-quarters of the pie and you get one quarter. It's like pie is great. Let's make a whole bunch of pie. And I'll try some of your recipes and you try some of mine. Uh, so I don't know that that's the heart of the book, but it is where the rubber meets the road. It is
And
where,
excuse me, there are some intractable
yes,
dispute, but it's within the context of this other attitude, this attitude
right.
that's foreign to us these days.
And I think that you're right that it plays out in so many ways. It plays out scene by scene. It plays out over the whole book. And it actually plays out, I think, in the interaction between the book and the reader. That
Yes,
it is not a top-down kind of thing like, here's the story and you will accept it. It's like, let me invite you into the story and see where you go with it. It
it's a gentleness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a gentle firmness.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm not thinking of gentle as being weak. Right. Yeah.
Right, exactly. When I was a teenager, there was a toilet paper that was advertised as being Stroft. That is strong and soft. And this novel is Stroft.
So I have a little bit of a different take. Um, I don't think this novel is as character driven as it is culture driven. Like the cultures are the characters, and I think it's really important that Iakinthu is, and this is a word I really have no clue how to pronounce it. She's Japhira or Japhira. Her cultural job is to
Mm,
be the bridge between cultures and the negotiator. So
yeah.
the same way that she can't pronounce names, she's always navigating. but I felt throughout like the different cultures that we're in at different times in the book are driving so much of how things happen that to me the ensemble is almost the ensemble of cultures because almost everywhere along the way they pick up someone to the
That's part of their of Ikintu's culture.
right, the
Yeah,
whole given children, which somebody called foster children and I think of as adoptees more, are so essential in what happens to given children. Timmy, you talked about the central storyline of taking this young man back to his original culture and letting him choose, but that letting him choose is prefigured so many
yeah,
times before it happens at the core of the plot.
yeah,
And there's a lot with slavery and different kinds of slavery and the roles and positions of different kinds of enslaved people. But it never felt to me it, it isn't driven by its plot, even though the plot is there.
yeah.
Timmy, we had a question in the chat in the Q&A that I'd love to have you answer, which is what do you mean by scaffolding?
Okay, all right. It's stuff that it's often it can be phrases or words that help you get the story onto the page. It can also be parts that don't need to be there, that are repetitions while you're working out what's happening and what's going on. And those things often don't get taken out by the writer before submitting them to the editor. And of course, certain writers are really good at getting rid of those from the get-go, like Karen Fowler, for instance. You know, I was at Sycamore Hill with her many times. She never had any of that in her drafts. But most people put a lot on the page that doesn't need to be there. And it just makes it clunky for the reader. And there's no reason for it to be there. Or sometimes it's telling too much that the reader would prefer, well, would take more pleasure in figuring out for themselves. Um,
I think of it as kind of a perfect metaphor word because it's the thing that when the building is standing and you take down the scaffolding, the building is still standing and it's
yes.
entirely,
And you
you
can
know,
see it
safe
better.
and strong
Yeah.
and completely constructed, and you don't need the scaffolding
And
anymore.
in fact, the scaffolding obscures its beauty.
Yeah. Not really sure. There's so many places we can go from here. And I think I'm going to go to Timmy again because you didn't want to read. But do you have a favorite section or passage that you like to think about, or a couple of them? And
Oh,
Nisi, were there others that you looked at when you were deciding what to read?
Hmm. Well, while Timmy's thinking, I can tell you that this was not my favorite passage. um, because I don't have one, because the book is just so enormously pleasurable, from
yes, yeah.
cover to cover. Um, the parts that stick in my mind are not necessarily they're not necessarily going to help other people, but the bathing scenes when they're scraping each other with the striggles.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I I also really love the feel of the scenes when they first arrive in what we can take for North America. And 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 they have their celebrations. And and sit up all night talking and smoking and drinking.
And I just want to say that like the big dramatic scenes where they were like fighting a sea monster and where they're confronting the fact that someone is trying to kill them, those are not the ones that are most arresting to me. The most arresting ones
Yeah,
are the everyday life. Like the idea that this is not a palace, this is an apartment building that we're in. That kind of thing. The quotidian is what attracted me.
yes, yes, yes. Could I say one more thing about my reading it as an editor?
Of
I
course.
really appreciated, although at first, so of course I read the acknowledgments last, I think, where Vonda says something about not reading this as conforming to historical chronology and fact, right? So, but it was after I finished reading it, I appreciated her ability to take what she wanted from history and use it and then let her imagination do as it wished. As a writer, I learned how difficult it is to take incidents from my life, for instance, or something that I've seen, and use it in a story without having it constrain me to the facts as I know them, and to unleash my imagination. And I mean, that's a step further to take. And she did it on a grand scale here, in several places, but also just generally by having a the history as a background that
Mm.
she painted on as a canvas. And that's a different way of thinking of alternate history. Usually, our alternate histories are marks a deviation from some certain point, and then you sort of map what the differences are and so on. That wasn't her interest here. And I think that that makes it harder for people to classify the book, but it's also a sign of the innovation going on in this novel.
So there's a great question in the Q&A from Kate McDonald, who is going to be recording a podcast for Strange Horizons
Ah,
about this book and reviewing Vonda's work. And she wants to know, and now I want to know, now that she asked, what the two of you think would have happened if editors who did not personally know Vonda had taken on this book. How different the process would have
oh
been.
boy. I think,
How they might have handled editing the novel with enthusiasm but no previous knowledge.
Well,
okay,
they
I think that they would have put it into a more standard shape. That's what I think they would have done.
Yeah, well, Kate's PS is what they might not let her get away with.
okay, if we're talking about conscientious people who did not know her, they would have read everything that they could get their hands on of hers to try
Ah,
and understand her writing voice, even if they did not understand her personal voice. That's the first thing they would do if they were conscientious. If not, they probably would have just like, cut like 20% of it or something.
more than that, I think. Yeah, yeah.
They wouldn't have gone for all the stuff that we like.
By the way, what I didn't say earlier was that of course, I read this book several times, including the editing, and each time I loved it more than the last time, which is for me always telling because I saw things that I hadn't seen before. But
I
anyway, I do think that um, even having read her work, a lot of editors, given a free hand, would have made the shape more conventional and brought out Iakinthu as the main character and so on.
I just
Yeah, the
want
battle with the Kraken would have been just like the heart
Yeah,
of it or
yeah,
something.
monumental.
Yeah.
the Kraken and the pirates. Um,
Yeah, yeah, those would have been the high points of the book, and I'm not sure what would have happened with the portage scene. I think they would have found some different way, or else given up going to the West Coast.
Yeah.
about the portage scene, for those of you who have not yet read the book, Nisi very intentionally and brilliantly left us on a cliffhanger. But and I want to keep it there, but I want to say that the ship is in fact flying, and the book does not in fact turn into a fantasy novel suddenly in the middle. Um, it is a grounded and at least moderately plausible scenario that gets the ship across Panama long before the canal. Um, I'm trying, and Kate just said in the chat, Kate Schaefer, going to the West Coast was really important to Vonda. I had that same reaction.
Yes,
That would have
yes.
destroyed the book. Going to the Pacific Northwest, where Vonda lived, was
And
really important to
and
Vonda.
I went to the museum in Nia Bay and I saw some of the artifacts Fonda was talking about. And I stayed in Nia Bay last year. It was after um, I, I'd read the book, and it was I could feel that place. I mean, I loved it, that part of the book.
Yeah, just one more thing about editors. I think you might have put your finger on one of the reasons nobody bought the book. None of the mainstream big publishers bought the book. Is I think that any, as what Nisi, I don't remember your word, but conscientious editor is going to be thinking about the dialogue with the writer,
Mm.
about finishing it. And I can really imagine some editors I know looking at that and going, I don't know how to take this on if I can't talk to Vonda about it. That could, I don't know, but it could be one of the reasons. So there's a question from Clarion, a little bit more about how the book can be read about as a heroine's journey. What you just said about the battle scenes being less important in the plot plays into that. I didn't hear anybody say heroine's journey. Did you see
But
Timmy?
I have brought that up because of I think it was Alan Boyle pointed out that this is the summer that they're releasing the Odyssey, which is like, the hero's journey. And this is more like a heroine's journey a la Gail Carriger because it is about an ensemble cast. Often Carriger will use heist movies as examples of heroines' journeys because what you're doing is you're putting this cast together, and then the work plays out, but that is not what it's about. It's about the togetherness and what happens to that togetherness in different situations. So yeah, that is why I think it is more like a heroine's journey. What, Timmy, do you have thoughts on that?
No, I think that
I think I don't personally think you can talk about this book as a heroine's journey if you don't talk about aging,
Mm,
because this is so much. a book about aging, about Iakintu, who was an acclaimed and renowned dancer with the bulls, basically a high-end circus acrobat with enormous skills in her 20s, and now she's 50, and she's dubious even about dubious even about this long journey that she feels committed to take. And a number of the other characters struggle with aging. When I think heroine's journey, I think, as we do with hero's journey, of young heroines. And I think that this is an aging woman's journey, and that the all of the implications of that are just different.
I do see aging as part of the heroine's journey, and one of the things that distinguishes it from a hero's journey is that it's there. And I remember when what I was reading, there's the part where Iakintu is actually questioning, am I old now? Because
Right.
I'm having a hard time recovering from this fever this time. Am I going to be?
It's not the first time she questions her
Yeah,
age.
Oh, yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I'm encouraging you all to put questions in the Q&A. And I
I
don't want
mean,
to keep putting,
Iakintu is a mentor throughout too.
yes, of women and men,
Yes,
or at
yes.
least women and Renthizu. Uh,
Well, she tries to be a mentor for Bedard too.
right.
Well, yeah, but Bedard's having none of it.
None of it. Y'all gonna go read it now, right?
We do not have to stay on this Zoom until 12:30.
But you have to do your
I
reading.
know. I was just going to say, let's do this because we seem to have reached a quiet point, and I don't want to be dragging conversation out of Timmy and Nisi, much as I would listen to both of them happily for the next 10 hours. Um, but I have a reading prepared, and it will give all of you a chance to see if you have more questions. And of course, something just popped up in the Q&A. What are the ways we can get the book? I think somebody from Clarion West will answer that in the chat. I know it was answered early. There are lots of ways to get the book, and everybody should. Um, but I will go ahead. I prepared two readings, and Nisi thought one of them was maybe a little too sexy, so I'm going to do the other one. Um, I think actually the one that I'm going to read is also pretty sexy, but what do I know? This is from much earlier in the book than what Nisi read. Um, and I think it doesn't need much introduction. Oh, one thing I do want to say is that Bedard, who shows up in Nisi's reading as an offstage character, as a very angry young boy, the angry young boy got his name from the musician who is named in this section. They are not the same person. And other than that, we'll just take it from here. The corridors and balconies lay silent and deserted. Mother Moon's light paved the harbor on land with silver, horned shadows thrust across alabaster. Movement and sound, soft as a breeze in the top of a tree, opened the silence. The moon gilded black hair, flounced skirts, jewelry. Moranti's companions approached from distant places, met, and flowed together like a stream. With the other companions of the eldest daughter, Iakinthu and Kilinkizu descended into the familiar darkness. Moranti received them. Baskets of spring lilies lined the walls, and intoxicating smoke rose from a brazier, while Bedard the musician played her lyre, filling the chamber with wild and joyous music. Iakinthu joined Moranti's sister Sitharante. They kissed Moranti. She returned the greeting, her lips warm and soft on Iakinthu's cheek. Iakinthu unfastened Moranti's vest, while Citharante untied the belt of her skirt. Morante stood naked before them. Iacinthu poured warm wine over her shoulders. Black and opaque between reflected moonlight and Morante's goldstone complexion, the red wine coursed down her breasts and over the curve of her belly and down her thighs like blood. Citharante poured scented oil to wash away the wine. It pooled at Morante's feet, floating on the spilled wine, gold over red as dark as sea purple. Wine and oil seeped between the floor's paving stones, feeding the earth. Iacinthu drew the pins from Morante's hair. Her curls cascaded over her shoulders, down her back, falling past her waist. Her eyes as dark and wild as a deer's, the eldest daughter stretched her hands toward the earth and cried out, raised them to the sky, and joined her voice to the music of the lyre. The other companions threw off their clothes, their jewelry, their hairpins. Iacinthu dropped her skirt and jacket and seal stones. She stretched out her arm. Kilinkizu anointed her. The wine flowed over her skin, over her hand, down her fingers, onto Kilinkizu's breasts. She shivered as the wine cooled her skin, lifted an ewer, and poured oil over Kilinkizu's body. The younger woman laughed, excited, scared. She cupped her hands beneath the oil and shyly stroked it onto Iacinthu's skin. They added their voices to the song. The eldest daughter led them across the slippery stones to the inner courtyard as Mother Moon reached her zenith. She floated round and full, golden, pausing above them for a moment before continuing on her journeys. They danced. The sky whirled as if stars and moon and earth spun and only Iacinthu remained still. The singing of the companions surrounded her, buoying her in the dance. Her hair spread behind her like a cape in the wind. Her feet warmed the stones, dancing them to life. She bumped against another dancer and stumbled. Instead of moving past her, around her, with her, Kilinkizu stood rigid in the moonlight, her fists clenched, squinting at the roof decorations, the stone horns. What do I see? Shocked to awareness, Iacinthu took her hands, slick with perfumed oil. Shadows, only shadows. Wondering that Kilinkizu had seen anything at that distance, Iacinthu drew her back among the others, into the circle whose center was eldest daughter. Touching, twirling, spinning past and around each other, they danced. A great deep howling filled the courtyard. The men ran toward them, covered with the raw hides of slaughtered beasts, their voices discordant against the song. The women danced, as calm as the men were wild, circling them, pulling away the bloody hides. They danced, they spun, they sang, taking the men's wildness, celebrating it. One by one, the men ceased their angry howls and joined the adults, singing, dancing, learning the joy of human people, the scent of women and men, of desire and sex, of lavender and rose essence mixed in the sweet, smoky air. The young Idaeans, Renthizu among them, joined the group, appearing from their secret shadows, smiling and laughing to think they had gotten away with watching the adults dance. Iacinthu danced a circle around Renthizu, merged her circle with the eldest daughter's, and gave Renthizu to her. The eldest daughter touched him, stroking him, sleeking his body with oil. The circle shifted, moving apart, centers changing. Kilinkizu, putting aside her anger and outrage, gazed into a great distance, danced, naked in the moonlight with her bright hair whipping around her. Giving birth, reborn, Mother Moon slipped between the carved stone horns of the western roof, sliding along the curve to nestle for a moment in the representation of the mountain's womb. The dance slowed, and the song fell to a whisper, to silence, to stillness. The last notes of Bedard's lyre flowed away. The courtyard lay sanctified. And that should give you some of a feeling of the kind of lyrical prose that Timmi was talking about at the beginning.
You're right. That is kind of sexy.
So let's see. Questions. Nancy says the fact that it is an ensemble piece changes both the concept of the heroes and heroines' journey. This is not a question. but it's certainly worth noting. Um, Kate wonders how people without these connections are likely to read the book. And Andrea says pivotal characters are different than protagonist heroes, a focus of
Mhm.
community action. So all really comments, but does that spark anything from either of you?
Looked like Timmy got something out of that.
Yeah, it does.
Well, I'm thinking about Kate's question. Um, and I think, I don't know, it depends on what the reader is looking for and open to, I think. So, yeah, I don't know actually how to answer that.
I guess one thing I would say is people who didn't know Vonda read many, if not most of her books. I keep running into people for whom she was absolutely pivotal as a writer who never knew her. I
Yeah.
once accidentally, or not coincidentally, introduced her to someone at a potlatch hotel party, and the person I introduced her to really literally could not stand up for the excitement of being introduced to Vonda. Um, just her knees just buckled. Uh, Vonda's reputation precedes her, and I hope it precedes her to this book.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they don't know that she changed everything. Because for me, she did. Um, Reading Dream Snake just made it possible for me to envision a kind of science fiction I would want to write, let alone read. So yeah, people who don't know her personally still are personally affected by her, and they should expect more change. They should just expect the unexpected.
Her novels are all very different from one another.
Timmy, are you able to say if there are large early ordering? You
Oh,
know,
it's too soon for me to know that.
okay.
I mean, we got I think we've um our reports from Amazon are for um 2 or 3 dozen sales so far. And through our website, I haven't checked it since 3 o'clock yesterday. But
That is such a publisher's comment. Oh,
we had about a dozen, yeah,
mhm.
since the release.
So just in those
But
two
there are
hours.
probably more now. But this is it's too early to tell.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there have been some nice there's been some nice attention. There's been some reviews, and there's a piece up on GeekWire. So I'm hoping that this will actually meet uh, meet with people who have never connected with Vonda before, and I hope they love it like I love it.
Yes. Yeah.
There's so much conversation in the chat about Dream Snake, and we really didn't say anything about any of Vonda's earlier books, and we have a little bit of time. Anybody, Nisi, Timmy, want to say something about about her earlier books, whatever that might be?
Mm. She was very, very humble about them. I will say that. She was just like, "Yep, it's a
Yeah.
job. Yep, I do it." But as others have testified in the chat, they were documents that changed how the world looked. Yeah.
I am still Dream Snake is something on the order of 50 years old now, and I still don't believe that we haven't worked out her biofeedback method of birth control. that
Yeah,
I,
boy, that really.
at the
So
time I thought that was brilliant and
I
completely
read that in the
doable.
late 70s, and
Yeah.
yes, and I carried that whole idea with me
For
until I met
for those,
Awesome.
if there are any who haven't read Dream Snake on this call, the idea is that every teenager learns how to manage their uh, reproductive systems with biofeedback, controlling things like heat. And it is a great cultural shame if you can't learn it. And it makes you somewhat of a pariah. And it has always seemed to me, Vonda started her life in the biological studies, and that particular one always seemed to me like, well, duh. Uh, and a favorite thing I love to say about The Exile Waiting, which was her very first book,
Yeah.
was that it has a mathematical genius who never saves the ship. She's just a mathematical genius. That's who she is. But her mathematical genius never changes the plot. And I thought at the time that was revolutionary.
So that was republished in 2019.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I don't know. I think that as far as a legacy goes, she has a lot to offer us. And people who read this novel prior to it being published, I'm thinking of Nicola Griffith, Eileen Gunn, they were so excited and moved because this was the next big thing, y'all. This was the Vonda novel. This was the thing that was going to, um, to use current parlance, disrupt the fiction scene. And they were right.
yep, yep. I was thinking, and it did. Somebody in the chat also mentioned The Moon and the Sun, which is a
Yes.
later
Yes. Oh, I
beautiful,
love
beautiful, beautiful book. And
yes.
again, actually, when I think about it, it has in common with Curve. It's about choice and people making the choices about their own lives. And if the person is making the choice about her own life as a mermaid, so be it. It's still a person making a choice about her own life.
I quote from The Moon and the Sun when I teach a lot because the thing is there are these different categories of difference, and some of them matter now and some of them mattered like 200 years ago, and she captures that. She captures the changing texture of difference, I guess you could say. So you ready for this next one? I am. I'm going to read it again.
Okay. I'm going to go read The Moon and the Sun again. That's what this conversation has just done to me right now.
Ah,
If there are no more questions and no more comments from Timmy and Nisi, oh, here's Marnie in the chat. The sea people may be somehow related.
they're the same. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're going to let you go a little early. And thanks everybody for coming. And insofar as the question about people not knowing Vonda reading the book, give it to your friends who didn't know Vonda. Come on, this is easy.
There we go.
Come on, people. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all for joining us. It was a great Saturday.
Thank you for hosting.